What's up, everybody? This is Talkative Carl back again for another movie review. And today we'll be covering the catalyst of the MCU itself, the original 2008 Iron Man, starring Robert Downey Jr., uh, 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 as well as Gwyneth Paltrow, Jon Favreau, at the time Terrence Howard, and Jeff Bridges, and also directed by Jon Favreau. You know, well, of course, with Kevin Feige still part of it from way at the beginning. And man, this still holds up. It still holds up. Just like with Batman Begins, this is like the quintessential way to make an origin film, and it's done so well. And I hear from a lot of people the look of Iron Man in this film still, in a lot of people's opinion, looks way better than any other Iron Man film or Avengers film that came after it. Even though it still looks good, it's just something like I guess like they gotta have to use like some level of prosthetics mixed with CGI and green screen effects and stuff like that. But it's just like, I don't know. It just seems like because at that time, before things starts jumping off and Marvel and Disney become this, colossal juggernaut, no pun intended, people was weary on, because in the 2000s, this is like, mid 2000s, getting to like late 2000s. But prior to 2008, superhero films were hit and miss in terms of the box office. I mean, unless you're like, some of the X-Men films at the time, at least the first two X-Men films at the time was like phenomenal. And at the time, people really did not care for, the third X-Men film. Then you got the Spider-Man films, and by and large, people, liked them fine. But I think like the first two Tobey Maguire films and the first Andrew Garfield film were, better than the last movies that, came later. Well, actually, I think like the Andrew Garfield films came a little bit after, the first Iron Man film. But you get my point. You know, at that time we had only the three Andrew Garfield films. I mean, Tobey Maguire films. But it's just like, wow, it's just like how things change over time. Now it's like, Tobey Maguire to Andrew Garfield came in with Tom Holland and No Way Home, which I reviewed on the channel. If you want to check out my full spoiler reviews of Spider-Man No Way Home, subscribe to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/talkativecarl, if you want to hear my thoughts. Because it is, I die on the seal, it's one of the greatest films I've ever seen in my entire life. One of the greatest films ever designed by mankind. The only two movies in my mind's eye that outdoes it, and it is like Avengers Infinity War and Endgame. You might argue maybe Dark Knight still might be slightly better. I say, I love Dark Knight, but it's just, I don't know. It's just like, No Way Home did something that you would not see in any other film ever. I mean, you could probably, I think Superman might be the only one that can get away with it, because all the, aside from Christopher Reeve, the only other, uh, you know, all the other actors who played Superman are still alive and still Vero and and put together and stuff like that, so they can come in for like a same way as Garfield and Maguire did for the Tom Holland film. But yeah, but back then, a lot of superhero films was like you know, by and large box office stinkers. But this film shows that you put in a little bit more effort with the cinematography and the writing, first and foremost, and like you have a set plan. And a lot of people, gives a lot of shit, to DC or even to Marvel currently, because now everybody's like in Phase 4. People think, oh, it's all over the place, no set, Golden Mine, or who's this and who's that, blah blah blah. It's like, be patient, okay? You don't need to know all the playbook here. Enjoy the ride, and you'll be more pleasantly surprised once we get to the end, because you don't have the whole playbook. And DC is trying to DC's in a hell of a thing on its own, but it's trying to for a time after Man of Steel, they've trying to cut corners, trying to get to where Marvel is, but from Iron Man 1 up until now, because She-Hulk has just started, and it's like even Marvel had to go through their trials and tribulations in trying to find their formula down, get their formula down to a science, and it took some time. I say well into Phase 2, they eventually found the groove. At least early in the Phase 2, they eventually found their groove. I argue maybe after Captain America 2, I think they found in my opinion, they found they really groove, because they knew they couldn't just start off with of course, at the post credit of this film, you hear about the Avengers Initiative and everybody, because nobody knew about post credit. I mean, post credits existed before MCU, but Kevin Feige really trained people to expect an end credit scene after every film. This was the first time people word of mouth got around yo, did you know there's an end credit thing? You gotta see it for yourself. Don't even spoil anything, because people really harped on you gotta see it. Look it up online. So I went up online. It was bootleg version, because it was still freshly after it was in the theaters at the time. So I looked it up, and you see Sam Jackson dressed as Nick Fury, and tell me I'm here to talk to you about the Avengers Initiative. And everybody lost their shit. It was like, oh my God, they bring in the Avengers. How they gonna do it? People wonder how you gonna do that? How you gonna? Because team-based superheroes, by and large, unless it's maybe the X-Men, even then they kind of don't know how to balance everything well. How you gonna do it? And they did it perfectly. Eventually, we'll go through the Avengers films, but they eventually pulled it off. The weeding aside, they eventually pulled it off with balancing out these characters, but they played it smart. You didn't start off with the superhero film. You started off with each, one of the main core of the first Avengers film, aside from maybe Hawkeye and Black Widow, which I did a review for Black Widow, I think. And yeah, they was really late in the game with giving Black Widow her own film, but is what it is. But you got Thor got his own film, Cap got his own film, Iron Man got his own, got a couple of films already with Iron Man. So, and then of course you got the Incredible Hulk, which at that time was played by Ed Norton, which coincided with what's going on with the MCU. And then they eventually because Edward Norton's trying to pretty much take over, or at least, I don't want to say take over, but I couldn't find a better word for it. But you know what I mean. Without taking the ego out of the whole situation. So they were replacing with Mark Ruffalo, which over time, we got used to, because I was hesitant with Mark Ruffalo, because I didn't know Mark Ruffalo before this, before the Avengers movie. That's the first time I actually seen him in anything. He's been in other stuff, but it's I knew Edward Norton in a few more stuff prior to the Incredible Hulk. I always thought he looks like a spot-on Bruce Banner, because he's kind of thin. I won't say lanky, but he's kind of thin and kind of polar opposite to the big bulky Hulk. But eventually, you warm up to Mark Ruffalo, and he did amazing job as the Hulk. Uh, um, but anyway, like, thanks to Jon Favreau and Kevin Feige and a lot of people who've been working on the first Iron Man film, they really showed the world, like, yeah, you can take these kind of movies seriously, and they only step the game up more after more. You can say what you will about Avengers 2. I enjoyed Avengers 2, but they just stepped their game up. And it's like, yeah, I mean, aside from Dark World, in my opinion, and some people don't really care for Captain Marvel. I think Captain Marvel is good, but aside from Thor 2, they've been batting 1,000 with a lot of this stuff. But even they had to get this down to a science. They had to like make sure you get to know each of these characters before you put them in a team, so you can cut through all the crap and get to the meat and potatoes. So yeah, this movie begins with, of course, Tony going through Afghanistan. Of course, in the original comics, when he was created, it was during the height of like Vietnam, so there's a lot of racist pictures back then. But you know, those were the terrorists, at least terrorists at that time. It was during the '60s, so because the way Howard started looking kind of like well, Stanley kind of picture like Howard Hughes kind of thing, and Tony, I guess, with the mustache and everything like that, and rich playboy thing. Howard Hughes was like the big guy at that time, as far as like playboy philanthropist. Um, uh, but in this interpretation now, because it was only 5 year, not five, 7 years after the whole situation of 9/11, Afghanistan, and like those were like the go-to terrorist guys, uh, for at the time. So I like this opening. It's an incredible opening with like just, of course, this is not too long after Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, you know, uh, uh, starring Robert Downey Jr. because he was just getting out of his like sobriety and getting his life in order and stuff like that. And Jon Favreau and, well, actually like Shane Black was one who like took a chance on him with Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, which he did a phenomenal job. He did his work. He came to work. He wasn't messing around. He wanted to get his life back together, and he needed that chance. And they gave him a chance. Studios took a chance on him, and he. I love Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. It's an incredible noir detective kind of comedy kind of movie, and like that led him to the role for Iron Man because he does give off the same appearance as Tony Stark, but also have similar kind of characteristics with like getting over, because Tony Stark is well known to be a recovering alcoholic. And with like it meshes well with Robert Downey Jr. recovering, like getting through his like addictions and stuff like that. So it's all like blends perfectly well. So you see like a shot with Tony Stark with a glass of alcohol in his hand, and he's messing around with these soldiers, and it's a funny little opening. And it's in there asking him like dorky questions. Well, not dorky. It's like, it's like, is it true you like, was supposed to be shooting like doing photo shoots with like swimsuit models and blah blah blah. Like that's an excellent question. Like yes and no. Yes, it was supposed to be doing this thing, but it was canceled. So the Christmas cover shoot was with twins and something like that. And I always like this line where like the soldier's sitting there like literally raising his hand like he's in school, and he was like, "You kidding with the hand raising?" I always like to quote that. You kidding with the hand raising, right? Is it cool if I take a picture with you? Yes, that'd be very cool. And he makes a MySpace joke because MySpace was still around at the time before Facebook completely took it over. Or not took it over, it just made MySpace completely obsolete. R.I.P. Tom. But they get ambushed, and then the soldiers died. Tony, tried to run out of there, but then like one of his own missiles, lands in front of him and explodes. He's far enough away where there's only a few shrapnel pierced through the bulletproof vest he was wearing underneath his clothes, and like some got near his heart. Then terrorists collected him, had Yinsen, one of those kind of like kind of sort of mentors, the guy that gets the hero off his butt to his pretty much his Uncle Benish kind of situation, get him off his butt to like do the right thing with the resources and knowledge that he has. He saves his life, but he only has a week left with limited resource. He managed to buy him a week before the rest of the shrapnel enters his heart because there's a power battery just keeping the shrapnel from his heart. And it's just like rudimentary arc reactor thing. And then he's translating for the terrorists to Tony Stark that, hey, uh, they said if you build them a Jericho missile, because he built Tony Stark the classic scene where he showing the U.S. generals showing off his Jericho missile, which is like 8 missiles that come apart and fires other miniature rockets that go all over the place, and does this classic like, and it's like an awesome picturesque shot, and his whole speech was so iconic. It's like, yeah, they say uh, they say the best weapons is the one you never have to fire. I have to respectfully disagree. I say the best weapons is the one you have to fire once. That's how Dad did it. That's how America does it, and it works out pretty well so far. It was I like that line. You got Rhodey in this, played by Terrence Howard, and it's like another celebrity with an ego, and he's like not bickering with the cast, but I think with Jon Favreau, and he eventually just got recast with Don Cheadle, who has been doing an excellent job at playing a War Machine, because you see that in the third act, and where you got Terrence Howard looking at, because I was in the theater and I remember him looking at that the stealth, or at least prototype, I won't say stealth suit, but the prototype Iron Man armor before he gets to the Mark III, and he says like, next time baby. Nah, not for you. It's like I can't help but have that or say that every time I see this scene, and it's like, yeah, but not for you. It's no next time for you, boy. Can you imagine if Terrence Howard remained as Rhodey throughout the MCU? But anyway, so Jensen and Stark, conclude like, yeah, they know these terrorists are bullshit, and they're not gonna let them go. They're gonna kill them as soon as he completes making them a Jericho missile. So they come to the idea, okay, we're gonna demand certain tools and parts and let them believe we're making a Jericho missile, but instead I'm making like the Mark I armor, which he does, but it has to power up. But Jensen had to buy them time because it wasn't completed yet, and they already started to suspect something's wrong. So Jensen gets hurt trying to stall them, and awesome fashion. This reminds me because like I went to it was like last year, where in Chicago Science Museum they have like a Marvel exhibit, and I posted on my Twitter and Instagram so you can see my pictures at the event, where you see there's an Iron Man section, and he actually got big glass cases of all the Iron Man armors. Well, not all of them, but like from like the suitcase armor, the Mark 1, 2, and 3, display in these in the separate cases, and they're big armors. So like I'm looking at this scene, and now I have a better context of how big and bulky these suits are, and like the part of the sheer terror that the terrorists felt when they got these metal monstrosity pulverizing, down these tunnels, pulverizing everybody going down these tunnels, taking everybody out as he could, destroying all the weapons that they collected that Tony made. Because as Jensen puts it towards him, like, uh, uh, you don't want this. Basically, you don't want this to be your legacy. That you're creating weapons that you are not, taking responsibility for. Because like you think like, oh, because like Tony Fall, he knew he was supposed to be helping people. He build weapons to help people, but no, they are hurting people. Especially when you get terrorists getting a hold of these things and they're using them to hurt people that he expected to defend them. And it's like you don't want that to be your legacy, to have blood on your hands. And as Obadiah Stane, who is obviously, you got the name Stane, of course he's the bad guy, but as he put it, we're ironmongers, and that's not a good moniker. So like, he doesn't have a problem having blood on his hands for as long as he's making a profit for making weapons for anybody who's the highest bidder. But Tony Stark still has a moral compass. Uh, so as he's flying out and like the suit's starting to come apart, he gets picked up by some U.S. Soldiers and gets taken back home. Holds a press conference, and I like this. It's like awesome scenes in this, and he has everybody, all the press, sit down with him because like as soon as come back, he's like, I want a American cheeseburger, and it's like, as you recall, there's a nice little callback here because this will follow up 10 years later in Endgame with his daughter saying like, I want a cheeseburger. And it's like, God, it just warms your freaking heart. But he's like, it made me want a freaking hamburger too. Now I'm thinking about it. I kind of want a hamburger right now. But anyway, uh, uh, he holds a press conference, and he tells people like, I never said goodbye to my father. I would want to ask him, like, was he ever conflicted? Uh, uh, did he question anything, or was he the greatest person that we seen all from the video reels? And he mentions how like, because nobody really speaks to this that much, where it's like he's been in captivity for 3 months. Of course, he would have seen some horrific stuff over there, and he puts it like I seen people killed by the very weapons I meant to protect them, and it's like he just decides like, I'm gonna abolish all weapon manufacturing starting today because I can't be a part, you know, uh, of this. And so, like, Stan has to do damage control and everything like that. And you get the introduction of Phil Coulson. Nice to see Clark Gregg. He doesn't, look like he aged all that much over the years, but this is 10 years ago, mind you. So it's like a lot of things had changed over the years. Man, can you imagine that now this is how, because of the MCU, this is how we determine time-wise. It's like BC and AC kind of thing. Now we got like the MCU where it's like, to dictate time this day and age. What else? So eventually Tony decides, like, because the arc reactor, now he uh, uh, made like a more improved one with like the better resources that he has in his workshop. He had Pepper, like, he tells Pepper to throw away the old one as an antique now, but she ends up putting it into this glass case as like a memento, with the words like proof that Tony Stark has no heart. And he decides that he's not making weapons, but he's making like an Iron Man suit, obviously to ensure that he's defending people because it's in his hands. He knows what it needs to be done with it, and keeping on pretty close to the vest from everyone. And you see him like doing like test runs with it. It was an awesome display of like you seeing Iron Man fly through the air, like with maneuvering and all the other stuff. But then later on, he goes to this, kind of like gala thing where he has a nice little moment with Pepper. You see this little seat because it's not that way in the comics currently anymore. But for a time, Pepper was like at least supposed to have been Tony Stark's kind of Mary Jane Watson kind of situation. But it didn't pan out, at least not in the comics, but in the MCU, it does. But he meets Phil Coulson, they have a little chat, but then a reporter comes to him, a reporter he met earlier in the film, showed Tony these pictures of the Ten Rings, this terrorist that was holding him hostage, who's, you later on know to be part of the terrorist cell of the Ten Rings led by the Mandarin, Bong Wenwu. The actual, was it Wenwu? Yeah, Wenwu, who's the actual Mandarin, but uh, uh, you see them, some of them still alive, and they still have like, Stark weapons, and it's like, because Tony's confused because like he knows he destroyed all of them before he left, and got rescued, so they shouldn't have any of his weapons. But lo and behold, there's like, his name plastered all everywhere, and he goes to Obadiah. It's like, like, have you seen these pictures? What the hell's going on? And it's like, and then Obadiah admitted like he's been like usurping his power and trying to take control of Stark Industries. So now it's like he realized Stane's been supplying, weapons, even though he says cease all that. And he's trying to oust him from the company. And then now he's not only, mad about that, but he also watching the news where it's like Yinsen's home village is still being terrorized by these the Ten Rings, at least the handful of Ten Rings, from the cell. And so he decides to suit up, flies over there, and takes out all those terrorists, and then flies away. It was an awesome display. One of the best scenes out of the entire film. There's a lot of great scenes out of this film. But he, as he's flying away, he gets intercepted by two U.S. Jets, these Raptors, I think they're called, like F-22 Raptors. And he calls in Rhodey, lets him know that it's him, like, he like, it's a suit, like it's him, like, but then all that got called off and claimed it was like a test run kind of situation. And then you find out that it was Obadiah Stane who hired these terrorist groups to essentially ambush and assassinate this convoy, but they didn't know Tony Stark was in there. So they, instead of killing him, they decided, okay, we'll just instead of buying the milk, we'll just get the cow himself, and have him make our weapons directly. So, but then he ended up escaping. So Stane takes the suit they recovered from the original Mark I suit that they recovered, and have his group of men murder all those terrorist groups. Then he later repurposed it to make it a big giant Ironmonger suit, which is like I think in the comics that's his Ironmonger suit supposed to be repurposed Mark I armor to be a little bigger, with a little bit more armaments, and is boot thrusters is kind of as they take off, kind of looks like rocket thrusters from like like rockets from NASA or something. It looks pretty good. Uh, and it needs to be powered by an arc reactor, which he tried to have his team recreate, but it can't because what Tony Stark did. It's outside their field of expertise. And you get the classic line from the guy who will show up later in Spider-Man Far From Home. It's like, Tony Stark built this in a cave with a box of scraps. Classic line. One of the MCU made very, very memorable lines that we will quote forever. So Stain eventually breaks into Tony Stark's place, uses like this little machine thing that sets off some kind of pitch in your ear that causes a detriment to your brain that in 15 minutes will end up killing you. But Tony Stark managed to, because Stain took his arc reactor from his chest to power his Ironmonger suit. So Tony has to go down to his lab to get the older model in the glass case, and thanks to Rhodey, he managed to get it so he can stop Stain as Pepper with Phil Coulson and the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, who I'm pretty sure at least 2 of them are secretly Hydra agents. Spoiler alert. But they try to stop Stain, but he goes in the Ironmonger suit and starts wreaking havoc, trying to kill Pepper and Tony. But Stark comes after Stain. They battle, and nice little callback to earlier in the film where he flies. Tony leaves Stain into the sky, and because he was testing his second model, so he utilized what he learned with the icing problem, which he improved on with his third armor. Sting has to experience like his icing problem, where it's like he reached to a certain point in the atmosphere where everything's freezing and nullifies his circuitry, so now he's falling like a stone. But Tony Stark, because he's operating on an inferior arc reactor, is losing power. So now he's back at Stark, a Stark Industry facility where a bigger arc reactor is stationed. Stain comes back, and there's a final battle ensues. A nice line from Jeff Bridges, like, you try to rid this world of weapons, and you get this best one ever. Now I'm going to kill you with it. And so Tony has Pepper blow the giant arc reactor to blow the roof, ends up killing Stain in the process, and it leads to like in the end where Phil Coulson's trying to give him his little word for word speech on the little slips, and you get the nice little line because from like the origin of Iron Man creation up to like early 2000s, there was always like Tony Stark had an alter ego, which was Iron Man, and he was supposed to be set up as like Tony Stark's bodyguard. But after a while, because Tony Stark got an ego, he, just like in the movie, he admits he's actually Iron Man. But I don't like that, they included that because, you don't want to ignore what was in the original origin stuff. And like I said, the movie ends with the end credits with the Avengers Initiative. I'm hard pressed to find anything wrong with this film. It still holds up. I guess it's a shame that Terrence Howard, if he didn't cause any kind of issue, he would have been in these kind of films and have some kind of legacy. But no, really weeping too hard for him because he eventually got his own TV show, for at least for a time, called Empire. But that all went to hell thanks to Jussie Smollett with his lying butt. So it's like, whatever. But yeah, this movie is solid. Uh, uh, Really got any kind of issues with it. I'm trying to think of some, and I can't. Uh, um, yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure you guys probably might have found something that you might have an issue with the first Iron Man film. Uh, but yeah, it's not perfect, I know, but it is like a great origin story. Probably one of the best origin superhero films of all time. Right up there with like it's neck and neck with Batman Begins, in my opinion. But leave a comment below. Let me know what you thought of the first Iron Man film. Any pros and cons to it. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. You know, smash that like button. Like show your support. That'd be really appreciated. YouTube algorithms, all that stuff. Good for you. It'll be good for me as well. So yeah, I will see you guys in a little bit while I cover a short Iron Man comic review.